Hello. Hello and welcome to a one-click factory session that will be hosted by me. My name is Ignas, and we will be hosting a session on how to perform high-quality Dynamics 365 finance and supply chain management testing for the one version service updates. So we'll begin the session, and first of all, a short introduction. My name is Ignas. I am the speaker for this session. I work for the Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations or Finance and Supply Chain Management department as the research and development technical team lead, responsible for releasing new products and services onto the market. I'm very happy to see all of the attendees. Welcome everybody on the session. First of all, just to the new partners that are joining on the session, I will perform a short introduction to One Click Factory if you have not heard of us, and then we'll go into the main session content, which will be on first part will be on how to properly perform testing on one version updates. What are the best practices that we have learned and we would like to share with you, the community, on how to perform this testing, what we have learned, some lessons learned, and also how to perform quality automated testing and quality manual testing with the Microsoft testing tool. At the end of the session, we will be hosting a Q&A. So just let me know all of your questions that you have in the chat. I will address them at the end of the session, starting from the first one up until the very last question. So we'll have time for questions. I'll have left some time. So if you have anything, just let me know. So that said, first of all, in short, about One Click Factory. One Click Factory is a Microsoft Innovation and Development Center that was established back in 2009. And essentially, we have three main business areas that we focus on. We focus on providing services for Dynamics partners only. And we focus on, essentially two Microsoft ERP products and also on the new Microsoft Power Platform services, web development techniques, and other areas. So our main focus is Dynamics AX or Finance and Supply Chain Management and Dynamics NAV or Business Central. So as I mentioned, I'm representing the Finance and Supply Chain Management side. We also have a big team on the Business Central side. One Click Factory specializes in performing upgrades for customer solutions, upgrading to the new cloud ERP versions, also performing custom development for partners as according to their needs. So we join together with partners, we join their teams and perform development, design work, and consulting work. Also, we perform quality assurance services. We ensure for partners, we maintain their ISV solutions, and also we perform quality assurance for their customers on behalf of the partner. So this is our portfolio. If you'll want us to kind of get in touch with us, just let us know. There will be the contacts at the end of the webinar, and we can definitely help you out in some areas that you might be interested in. So going into the slides, first of all, first question is how do we make sure that Dynamics 365 Finance and Supply Chain Management is functioning properly after the one version update? So to answer this question, there's no easy answer. The only way to ensure that F&O is working after an update is installed is to perform testing. And One Click Factory has developed the three-step testing service that is we use to test out customer solutions and ISV solutions. As you know, when Microsoft releases and applies an update, even though they announce what new features are being released, they announce what new hotfixes are being released. You do not know the exact pieces of code that are being changed. Therefore, you need to test out all of your extensions that were built on the standard solution and all of the functional processes that were built on the standard solution. So testing is a very important step, and Microsoft also in the official guidelines, they always mention that the last step after installing an update is testing. So in order to ensure that the process works, we need to perform this testing. That way, the customer can trust that the solution will work after the update is applied into the production environment, and their business will remain uninterrupted. So this testing should be implemented as a very basic and daily routine after each service update is applied. So having testing policies is very important within a company, and that testing can be performed by the customer itself, by the partner, or by any third party, for example, One-Click Factory. So for all of the new partners that are joining here, this year we have launched the solution maintenance service at One-Click Factory, where the goal of the service is to provide support for the end customers on behalf of the partners. So what we do is we approach this problem into 3 steps. The first step is the initial discovery phase, where we talk with the partner about the customer solution, or if it's an ISV partner, we talk directly with the ISV partner, with the ISV solution owners, and we talk about the need for quality assurance and the need for testing. So we try to answer all the questions. How do you perform updates? How do you perform testing today? And how can One-Click Factory help you in those areas? Do you need us maybe some extra hands to perform the testing? Do you need us to build your testing guidelines and build the testing policies, or just provide maybe technical support on some hard questions that you might be facing when you're installing these updates? So we we perform this initial discovery phase where we talk about the needs for quality assurance. After that is done, if all the parties are happy, then we go into the agreements, and that is where One-Click Factory enrolls the partner into the subscription. And we start usually by one customer at a time, one solution at a time, where we analyze that particular solution and we build any prerequisites that are needed in order to provide the continuous support. So this can be anything. This can be performing documentation work to prepare documents for the testing engineers. This can be documenting all of the users' business processes. This can be building automated tests or building the testing scenarios. Any preparation work that is needed in order to provide the continuous support for the long term. Once that is performed, the last phase is the ongoing support. So this is the main focus of the service, where One-Click Factory will perform regular tasks and some tasks that are requested by the customer or the partner directly. And we will perform updating for the environment, testing the business processes, testing the modifications, providing reports, providing status checks, what we have found, where is the danger, where is the warning signs, what you need to investigate. And also we provide full support if something doesn't work. We provide recommendations, what you can do in order to fix. And also we perform any fixes or development work if it's needed to actually fix or develop some effort. So this is a very big service where it can start with, for one solution, it can be just performing the testing, for example. For other solutions, it can be performing the update, performing the communication with Microsoft, informing customers when the next update, and doing the full planning, building the testing library, building the automated test library for the long term, and other key steps. If you're interested in hearing more about the service, just let me know. Get in touch with OneClick Factory, and we will go into the details where I will present each of these services, each of these parts of the service, and how we do it, and what is where you can benefit from. So that said, now we will move to the second part, where we will try to discuss what we have found during our solution maintenance service phase during this year. So we have some customers that are running this, and we will try to kind of share some key lessons that we have learned so that you can take it into consideration and maybe implement it for yourself. Before that, I would like to ask you a question to get some engagement. So you will see a new question pop up on your screen, where we will ask you, how often do you perform Microsoft updates for your customer solutions? So we know that this can be very different. So different partners, they prepare it for different sizes. So this can be 2 or 3 times a year, 4 or 5 times a year, or every single update, which is 8 times a year. So give us your answer, let us know. And then at the end of the session, we will look at the answers, and you can also provide questions for it, and we'll try to kind of see where we are at. So hopefully you have submitted your answers, and we'll look at those. We'll look at those at the end. You can also probably see it at the poll section, at the results, and you can see what other partners, how they are implementing, how often they're implementing these updates. So now moving into the best practices. First thing that we have found when we started engaging with customers and partners in the context of the service is that documentation is always where the communication starts. Having a clear and well-defined test cases, user stories, or testing scenario documents is very important. So in this case, we refer to as the actual steps that the user needs to perform when they want to test out some certain functionalities. You need to have documentation in place, what is needed to be tested each and every single update. So if, for example, you only go to the partner and you say, okay, test out your solution, ask the user to go through their processes, that's fine. But you need to have everything documented and everything checked, that everything is being tested. And you need to keep track that everything was tested, because this will be on recurrence. So it's not enough one update to just test out something, then the next update just ask the user again, just go through your processes. A lot of areas can be left untouched. So you need to build an extensive list, if that doesn't exist, of all of the testing scenarios that you want to achieve, that you want to comply with. So having this kind of documentation will first ensure that all of the areas are tested each iteration, nothing is skipped, and you fully know that your solution everything is tested, and you can trust that it will work once deployed to production, and you will have confidence into the solution. When you have clear documentation, also if there's OneClick Factory engagement, where we have our internal testing engineers, we have our testing team that engages with the partners or the customers. We talk, our engineers engage, and they use that documentation as reference. So it's very important because they go through that documentation, and if it's clearly and well defined, if it's easy to understand and clearly formulated, then there's less questions that, for example, they need to ask the solution owners, and they need to engage with. So having a clear documentation, it's also beneficial from OneClick Factory side, as it kind of reduces the need for communication going back and front to the solution owners. Also, what we found is that it's very good if you use the task recording or video attachments as references together with these documents, so that these can be used This can be used to exactly know which steps do you need to perform when you do the test. So the user will explicitly know each steps, what they need to go through. And then they can just repeat it, right? They can just do it. So it's very easy to understand. You fully know that that will be executed, and you don't need to perform a lot of documentation work. You can just record it pretty much. Also, it's important that in this documentation, you specify always what is the outcome. So it's not enough to specify what steps do you need to perform. You need to specify what is the expected outcome, either in each step or at the end of all of those steps. When you know the full outcome, what is needed to, what is expected, then you can compare it to the actual result that you get. And from that, you will know if the test is successful or failed, or you need to dig deeper because you got a result that is undocumented. So the expected result is always needed to be known beforehand. Also, it's very good if you specify the key variables in the beginning of the document. And these key variables, they represent, for example, the data that needs to be changed when you perform these tests. So in this case, when you perform regression testing, so for example, we always recommend to perform regression testing. That means repeating the same test multiple times with different data sets. So with different variables, with different data that is being used to make sure that that scenario that is being executed is executed within multiple times, right? So in that case, you will fully know that it's not there's no data related issues, and that scenario can be used in the production environment. So having a defined data set in that document really helps out the user, which variables to trigger, and also the testing engineer that, for example, would be performing that test on behalf of that user. They will not need to engage. They will see, okay, this is what we need to use. We will go through it, and then we will report the results. So this is an example screenshot of a testing document that we have built for one of the solutions. This is kind of the detail level that could be expected from these documents. However, this can look very different. Each company has its own policies on documents, how they're supposed to look. So this is what we build just for one particular solution. But for example, when we engage with customers, we always ask what is the template that you would like this documentation to be in, because then the customer will have this for themselves and they will be able to use this in the future. So we fully adapt to the company's templates, but the idea is very similar in all of these documents. So first, we identify what prerequisites are needed in order to perform this test. Maybe there is some specific data set that is required here. Maybe there are specific tests that need to be performed before performing this case. So this is where you specify the prerequisites that you need in order to perform this test. Then you detail the exact steps here at the bottom, which you need to perform. So the user or the engineer that goes through this, they can fully see, okay, I need to perform this step. This step, I need to go to some page, I need to perform a task. And then here we also document the expected result in each of these steps. The expected result can be documented at the end, or it can be documented on each of the steps. Of course, it's better to have it in more detail. That means in each of these steps. That way it provides more clear idea what you are expected to achieve. And then lastly, we also have the data requirements. All the data is performed in reference with all the tests are performed in reference with some data. So here we specify some sample data sets that can be used when need to perform this test. So this can later be used when performing that test many times. And the more of these data requirements you have, the more different regression you can perform with the same business case. So this is just an example how it can look, but these details are a very good representation of what you need to have in your testing documents. Now, moving ahead, the second very important thing, it might seem very obvious, but communication is also very important. When performing any kind of testing work, you need to ensure that the testing team that is performing the communication, that is performing the testing, has direct communication with the solution owners who know how the tests, how the business process is supposed to look. So even if in the customer environment there are some other users that are dedicated to perform this testing, they need to have clear contacts, clear line of contacts. Who do they need to ask from the business process leads when they are performing their test? Because sometimes you have something documented, but you get a result which is not documented, so something that is completely unexpected, and then they don't know how to move forward. Therefore, you need to have a clear line of communication for any functional questions that might arise, and also for any kind of technical errors that you might see when a new update is applied, because as you know, these updates can bring in technical issues alongside functional issues. Faster responses lead to faster testing results, and then faster delivery for the update on the production environment. One-Click Factory performs this communication again, usually directly with the partner or directly with the customer if that's how the partner wants us to engage with. And we build our line of contacts. Who do we contact? Who do we report to? And we bring in all the questions, results to those personnel as soon as we get those, so that we can provide the tested solution in a very fast pace within few days, so that the customer can have it tested and can have it in the UAT ready to go and ready to be installed in the production. So we try to achieve it as fast as possible. Now, the last thing is always the people that are performing those tests. As you know, testing is a very subjective topic, because one person who is performing a test can just go through the steps and report if it's good or not. Other person who might be more skilled and know the product very well might go through the same steps, get the same result, but he might have 5 questions in the process, where each of those would be related. Hey, what do you think? Could this be a possibility if the users, they change some of this data here or do some steps different? So this is where the true benefit of having a dedicated testing team comes in. Having dedicated testing engineers really gives more value than going through these steps by users, as these engineers are skilled in performing quality testing. They know the Dynamics 365 products. They know finance and supply chain management baseline. They know the business processes, and also they know how to perform quality testing, because they have the testing experiences in it. So they will already see that, okay, we have a guideline that we need to go through this business case or this modification, and then we'll have questions. Okay, but what if I change this here? What if I do this here? And this is where you might get different results, and you will ask more questions like, what would happen if I do this? And that will prove to be a very valuable experience, as it will bring in some issues that you might have not foreseen when that documentation was built, just because maybe the users wasn't using the system like that. But you never know when they will start using the system in some different ways or some different steps. So this essentially means that you have to have a competent team. At One-Click Factory, we have always a senior testing lead that is responsible for the quality of the service, and that supports all the testing engineers on their daily tasks, and also engages with the solution owners on more complex topics. Also, it's very important to be onboarded on the solution in a very good manner, as better onboarding always means that the engineers will know the solution better, and they will be able to provide more accurate testing when they will go through the modifications, and they will go through these main key steps. Now, moving forward, I would like to share some kind of guidelines that we have found when we tested with manual test cases, and we tested with the Microsoft tool, Regression Suite Automation tool, that is used to build automated tests for regression testing. The goal of using this tool is, of course, to save the time that either the testing team or the user would need to go through when performing this process manually. And with automation, he can, first of all, he can save effort, he can save his time, and he does not need to perform any tasks that are very tedious. As you know, testing is not something that usually a lot of users feel very kind of. So when approaching automated testing, the most common errors that you will see is always will be related to data. Data errors will be the most common ones. Therefore, in order to run these tests and maintain these tests, you really need a skilled engineer that is maintaining and running these. As if you input some data set, you might find that, okay, we run it with that data set and we get some standard Microsoft error because the inventory might be out of stock, or a validation might not pass, or that order or that number or that voucher would be already used. So you need to manually perform the update to that data so that that automated test goes through, and it goes through all of the steps. So that means the engineer that is maintaining these tests, he needs to understand F&O, and he needs to understand what kind of data errors you might get and already prepare the data sets upfront. So that's one thing. Data errors are very common. That's why documenting the data sets in the beginning is very important, so that you can just use different data sets and see what's the most important one to test out. Then when using the RSAT tool, always create as many small tasks as needed. We always recommend having more or a big amount of small test cases instead of having one big test case that is well, very long. You can chain the smaller ones into a big one, that all of these run one by one with the data that is generated from the last test case. So we call it chaining. When you have this multiple split, you will see that it's much easier to perform regression, as you can, if you get an error on step number 3, let's say, you can just repeat the step number 3, and you don't need to rerun the full full test case from the beginning. So it will save you time, as you don't need to prepare all of the data sets. You can just update the step number 3, and you can also run these test cases more quickly, more efficient, and perform regression on just one test case independently. You just need to provide the input data. Also, always perform regression with at least 3 or 4 times. We like to run the same steps, especially with automation, with different data sets multiple times. So just to ensure that everything works with different data. And again, this is where you need to perform good discovery phase to ensure that you get the correct data sets from the customer input or from the solution owners. Also, it's very handy if some parameters or configuration changes in the production. When you restore the database back to the testing environment, it's very good if the testing team is notified that there are some parameters or configuration changes. When these changes occur, usually it means that the test case will behave differently, and the engineer will need to investigate why did it behave differently, what were the reasons for it. So in this case, we can save time if we know beforehand that, hey, this parameter has changed. We expect changes here. We can appropriately update the test case so that it reflects that new parameter. So having new configuration, new parameters, or new kind of processes that have these new parameters in place, knowing beforehand helps the test cases a lot. And also, all of the test cases should be run with the finance and operation roles and not with the administration or administrator role. It might seem clear, but you need to ensure that you run the test cases as a auditor, as an invoice clerk, as an AP or AR clerk, instead of running everything as administrator. As the users, that's how they're using the system. They're not using the system as administrators, and they can see they will get different, you might get different behavior. So you need to ensure that you run as the proper roles. Also, automated testing, even though it's very good and very handy, it has its own limitation. Now, from these limitations, one of the things that we have found is that some cases, automated test cases, they take a lot of time to set up and to run. In cases when they really take a lot of time to set up and run, you might be better even to running that test case manually. Since if you spend more time setting up the automated test case than actually, running those steps, then it kind of loses the one of the purpose, which is speed, right? Automation, we use it so that we can increase speed, efficiency. But if we need to set up all the data and it takes us 20 minutes, let's say, I probably can run 3 or 4 iterations with that, with different data sets on that business process. And when running manual test cases, you still get the same, test case. You just need to, perform it manually. So here, when again performing the discovery, you need to immediately kind of decide, is this a manual operation that we're going to do, or is this some automation that we might want to build? Usually you start with more manual work than automation, and then as you kind of move along, you start automating one by one these processes, and then using these automation guidelines. Automation is best used in cases where you have small steps, small data variables. That means not a big number of data variables that you need to input. And then lastly, you need to, when you run these test cases, it's easy to repeat those in multiple times, right? So we found that it's easier to run these in AP, AR, financial side, assets, journals. And usually more manual effort is used in manufacturing, production modules, warehouse management, and the warehouse mobile device. So in these areas, sometimes the RSAT tool does not, well, first of all, it does not cover some of these. In other cases, you need a lot of prep data, and sometimes it just makes sense to perform the manual effort than automation. So just keep that in mind, and you need to limit your expectations. Same goes with technical limitations. The tool is not perfect as of today. Microsoft is investing in the tool, and it's getting rebranded, and as probably it got a new user interface this year, and it's getting new features. So it's being advanced. That's a good thing. But also there's some technical limitations that currently you can't really use the tool for those. So you always need to combine it with some manual testing efforts. And we try to summarize these. So the technical limitations that we found, the main ones include that when you have a very complex rule sets, that means you have many, if this data, then this should happen. If this data, then this should happen. And if you end up with a lot of steps that are dependent on each other, you will see that it's very difficult, if one of them fails, to reproduce all of them to the exact same place. And it can become complex to actually create that automated test case. So then if it's very difficult and very complex rule sets, we just document it and then we perform manually, because when you do manually, the engineer or the user that is performing it, he fully knows what should happen, what will be the end results, and what you need to kind of think about. So he will immediately think of multiple scenarios that go besides the main area. Then also we have some areas like static reports, comparing the report changes, design changes in electronic reporting reports, Excel reports, or SSRS functionality. workflow framework, and also integration scenarios. Integration scenarios, probably inbound, outbound integrations. You can't really trigger those from the RSET. So in that case, we have different tool sets that we use on the side of besides RSAT, and we test out those integrations with testers, with different integration testers, and we get those results and report those as a normal test. So do not have this expectation that you will be able to automate everything. You should aim at automating the most repetitive, most redundant, and the most easiest tasks that don't need any manual effort or manual inputs. Manual testing usually will always be part of the full testing lifecycle, and it will probably use to cover the complex scenarios and cover the scenarios that need human input. So when you have a skilled test engineer, when he's performing a test, if he is mindful, he will be able to easily think of multiple what-if scenarios, which each of these what-if scenarios, they will be able to think about multiple areas where he might need some. He will be able to identify some possible issues and possible problems, and then raise those. Right. So this is where you have extra value, as the manual tester can fully raise these questions, go back to the solution owner and say, "Hey, we have tested this, but have you tried using this, because you get a different result?" And this is when the solution owner will see, okay, thanks guys for letting us know. This is something that we will look into, for example. With an automated test, it would just run the test and you wouldn't think about those scenarios. So manual testing shouldn't be overlooked, and it will always it will always be some part of the testing lifecycle. That's why you need to have the testing capacity and the testing engineers that are ready to do that manual effort and provide that confidence for the customer solutions. So that said, we're nearing the end. This was the main content that I wanted to share for this session. We will definitely do more of these sessions as we kind of go to the next year, and we will share our experiences and our knowledge. If you're interested in hearing more about the solution maintenance service that OneClick Factory is currently performing, and you would like some engagement with us, just let us know. We have a full experienced testing team that is ready to tackle any problems. We have testing seniors that are also joining the testing procedures, and we try to assure all of the quality and perform any maintenance work that would be needed for the customers on behalf of the partners or for direct ISV partners. So that's it. If you're interested to hear more about this, just let us know. So you can email us directly at service@oneclickfactory.com. You can also go to our website. Links are here at oneclickfactory.com and just ping us from there. Also, we have a few handouts that are added in the chat, which you can download, and you can get those. And now we'll go to the so this is the handouts, the useful material that you can find, and now we'll go to the Q&A. We have 5 minutes left, so let's jump into the questions. So the first question we have that I see is from Andre, which is, how much time does it take to prepare? And it's gone. I saw the question. There it is. It's published. Okay, now it's there. Okay, so we have from Andre, how much time does it take to prepare a DAP test for a customer on average? As an example, let's consider a sales order invoice posting process that includes creating a sales order, posting confirmation, and then sales posting. And customer application has some not very deep identifications and dimension process. There are some new fields custom. Yeah, very good question, Andre. How long does it take to prepare a DAP test for a customer on average? it very much depends, on, of course, the modification size and how deep is the process, right? To go through this documentation effort and to go and build the testing manual, it's really not that much. So what we do is we usually use the task recording to record all of the steps that we need to do for the business process, and then we highlight the steps that we need to test out, and then from that we build like a testing scenario document that we test out all of these areas. So for example, we would take each of this step, let's say creating a sales order, then we would highlight, well, first we would test the creating the sales order, the basic Microsoft process, then we would test all of the modifications related to that, and that would be done on a recurring basis. So to prepare the test or adapt that test, it's really not that much effort. It's usually like 1, 2, 3 hours, depending on what the customer already has. Since we already done it multiple times, we can do it quite efficiently. If the customer already has some documentation, then we just adapt it, then it's even less. If they don't have anything, then we prepare it for them so that they can have. So we use our templates, and for your case, for one of those, it would be maybe 1 to 2 hours, and that would be pretty much complete. Now, for having on a recurring basis the testing, you can have you can test those out pretty quickly if you have the capacity for it. So we have our testing engineer capacity that does regression on those test cases multiple times so that ensure that it works. If we automate it, then it's even quicker, but probably would be able to test it out in 1 or 2 hours, depending on how much steps do we have there. For notifications and sending them to Microsoft Flow, yeah, so that testing is also not that difficult. We could trigger those flows manually from Microsoft Flow, for example, and see the results. So that could be incorporated also in the same testing area. Okay, then we have a question from Veronica. Do you use Azure DevOps for the test documentation? Yes. So we use Azure DevOps as the main repository for having all the test cases. All of those test cases, we create work items, and then from those work items, we attach the documents that we have built, and we keep the DevOps as the main repository. So that means the customer that we're testing or we're supporting, they have this full repository built for them. And even if one day, let's say, One-Click Factory goes away, they have this full testing policies built, and they have their guidelines, they have their procedures built, the documents, and they can, if they have the capacity, they can do the testings themselves and follow the same procedures that One-Click Factory prepares in the onboarding phase. What if any of the automated tests fails? What to do next? So if any of the automated tests fails, you need to start investigating why did it fail. Usually we perform the steps manually before running them. Well, first, sometimes we just change the data and run it again. Sometimes we immediately go into the investigation phase and we try to analyze why did they fail. So this can be because of the documentation. This can be because of the data, because of the code, or any other kind of area. So you need to investigate. Once you find the reason, rerun it with some new data set. If it's something related to code, you need to report it to the solution owners and say, hey, this has changed, this will not work, we need to fix it, and then continue that communication. So the short answer is perform investigation. Could we send a link for the recording once the session has completed, as has dropped off from the call? Yes, we will send that. We will send that recording, so you will have it. Okay. Yeah. And one more question from Veronica: is it really more efficient when you have smaller records? The initialization of the tests take a long time with RSET. Yeah, so that's true. When you restart it from from scratch, it takes a long time to restart. But what we do is we prepare the data beforehand for these different steps, and we prepare them all at once. So we usually prepare this whole bundle of all of the cases that failed. Then we rerun everything. We get new results, and then we continue that approach. That way, we can kind of save time, as the engineer can just start the input the data. We start it, then for an hour do other tasks, and then after that's all of that is done, all of that is finished, we come back and then we analyze all of those solutions. So we don't wait until it finalizes everything. So smaller records, it helps us to pinpoint the exact area where did it go wrong. We don't need to repeat it. We know that half of the process is good, and this one single chain is causing us maybe some issues. So then we kind of go into that. And from Sophia, we have also a question: can RSAT be used for F&O on-premise? The short answer is yes. You can use it. You can use it with on-premise F&O, as it connects to the AOS, and it's from that perspective, it doesn't matter if it's hosted on the cloud or if it's hosted on the premise. So that is fine. And for the polls, for the poll question, we see that the biggest answers was 2-3 times per year, which is something that I have expected. It's very common to do 2 or 3 updates per year, as we know, customer capacity is very well, difficult to perform the proper testing and proper delivery on these. So during these areas, usually we have the so-called peaks, April, November, and One-Click Factory also does support for, even if you do updates 2 or 3 times a year. We dedicate the testing team for those months, and then we prepare full end-to-end testing so that the customer does not need to go and do the testing themselves. They can just trust One-Click Factory and for finding all of the areas that might break. Good. So that said, we ran out of time. We're a little bit overboard, but thank you everyone for joining. I'm hoping that this session was useful. You have learned something new, and until next time, if you will want to get in touch, just let us know, and then we'll get in touch with you. So thank you everyone for joining, and have a good rest of the week and a good weekend.